Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff One Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio.
And welcome to another edition of Activists Around the World. And we are keeping in theme with the Indigenous peoples and what they have done and what they continue to do around the world and for the community. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about cartography, I guess, and essentially how they are making some amazing changes and advocating for their community. But before we start, Anney, you and I recently had this conversation about how we did not have GPS. Yes, folks. I think there's a lot of us who remember days before GPS and taking around Yahoo Maps, not even Google, because Google really wasn't a thing at that point. It was Yahoo Maps everywhere and trying to figure this out. But even before then, before having the point-by-point direction, there was just maps. Can you read a map?
Yeah, actually. Yeah, I can.
Yeah, okay. So if I just handed you, we got to go to this, and can you read it, not on roads either, actual land maps?
I don't think I would be excellent at it, but I think I could do it. And my mom and I were talking about this the other day because we were in a situation where a map needed to be read, and I read that map.
Yeah. Look at you.
I was pretty impressed, and I probably shouldn't have been, but...
There's a lot we know the whole trope about women not knowing directions, men refusing to ask for directions, all of those things. I think we need to come back and talk about cartography and women. I think that would be really fascinating because the idea of maps and then 3D maps, I was obsessed in social studies when we would have the raised maps and trying to follow the landscapes and trying to figure out mountains and the deserts and what areas go to agriculture for agricultural needs as well as for land building as well as property lines. Man, it's a whole big field. And I'm wondering, as everything has become more and more technology based and we've gotten more advanced, what cartography looks like today, to be honest. But because of those advancements, it has really, really helped into at least organizing and or bringing predictors for possible disasters, which is what we're going to talk about today. But I just had a moment of cartography. We don't actually talk about that much anymore. I wonder what is happening in that world. Of course, Arrested Development, that dude was Buster. Did you watch that? He was in cartography and he couldn't actually read maps. He was just coloring all over the place. I feel like that would be me.
I mean, that's a valuable, it's a mental,
coloring?
Release.
You were so kind. As I'm making fun of myself, you're like, that's good for you. You self-care with that map coloring, Samantha. You self-care. But yes, there is a reason we are talking about maps in general. I definitely went off because Arrested Development. It was funny. All right, but today we are actually talking about the leadership and activism of Hindou Oumarou Ibrahim, who is an environmentalist as well as a women's activist from Chad and is an Oumarou Indigenous pastoralist as well. And these are, again, a few of the hats that she wears. She is, as we were talking about, a cartographer and more, and she's really used these technologies and this skill in bringing a community together and helping her lands and her peoples to try to navigate what is happening in the climate change, which is impacting them pretty greatly. She's been active in advocating for her Indigenous community, whether it's spending time with her community as they continue to farm and herd the land, or working to help those who don't have access to higher education to get that access. It was when she was in school herself, she understood how many Indigenous women were not able to get the same educational opportunities. So she founded the Association of Indigenous Pool Women and Peoples of Chad, or AFPAT, AFPAT. And the organization started as a community-based organization that focused on the rights of girls and women in Oumarou, but has since grown. In 2005, 6 years after the founding, the organization received an operating license and has been working on an environmental level, including participating in international negotiations for climate change, environmental protection, sustainable measures around the community, and more.
And throughout her advocacy, she has continued to talk about the intersections of human rights, women's rights, and environmental rights, and that to fight for justice and rights, you can't advocate for one without the other. In an interview for Rolex and Time magazine, she said, "People need to understand that we cannot talk about human rights without talking about environmental rights. We all depend on nature. We interact with our environment. That's why, for me, I can't protect human rights without also protecting the environment." And that's something she has been doing for her community. After witnessing the detriments her community has gone through due to continued climate crisis, Ibrahim has been working as a leader to help her people and those around her. In the Oumarou community, climate change has decimated water access and land access to the herding community. Lake Chad, an important water source for her community, has gone down to 10% of what it originally was. This loss has not only caused hardships for the land as a resource, but it started a violent competition for the farmers trying to get access to the water and other dwindling resources, as well as displacing many families in the community.
Yeah, she watched as the impact grew, and she began experimenting with an idea to not only have the Indigenous community come together, but to lead together to work on creating a mapping system that could help locate and allocate resources for farmers and herders within the Indigenous community. She knew that because Indigenous people were the most affected by the climate crisis at that point, that they would be able to find a way to create a system to make progress in combating the harms of climate change. She stated, "As an Indigenous peoples, we know how to protect our forests. We know how to manage funding. You just have to respect the way we do it. We want to be partners, not recipients or beneficiaries." And she has been very, very vocal about the fact that they need to be the leader in this conversation, and I absolutely agree. One of Ibrahim's first projects included working with meteorologists to get accurate local forecasts that eventually became text message alerts to help herders and others to get information that is often unpredictable, but trying to get that information in advance.
Right. And she then went on to work with local Indigenous farmers to start a mapping exercise, getting community members to plot migration patterns and corridors for cattle to water. Then she met with fishers to get information on access to shores and moved on to getting information from farmers for cropland data. And Ibrahim collaborated with UNESCO and the Indigenous Peoples of Africa Coordinating Committee, or IPACC, to create a 3D map of Chad's Sahel Desert region with over 250,000 Mbodoro. Ooh, that's a tough one to pronounce. I hope we're getting it somewhat close. People who rely on farming and herding. The map helped the community to plan for future climate needs and mitigation. It allowed for the voices of the Indigenous people to be a part of the science and technology conversations, to make decisions for the future and how to work sustainably for their community. And even more, the project helped Indigenous women to have a voice and decision-making power in a way that continued to uphold the traditions of their culture.
And her continued work in advocacy has made her a leader not only for her community, but across the nation. In 2016, Ibrahim was selected to sign at the historic Paris Climate Agreement. And in 2018, she attended the United Nations Climate Change Conference, where she reiterated the importance of government responsibility and how they and policymakers were the ones who could create real change instead of putting it solely on individuals, which happens way too often. And in 2019, she was appointed as an advocate of sustainable development goals by the UN. And with all that, she has served as co-chair of the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change. And she is also a member of the Policy Board of United Nations and so much more.
And with all of this responsibility, she has garnered awards and accolades for her work, including 2017's National Geographic Society Emerging Explorer, 2017 and 2018's BBC's 100 Women, 2019's Pritzker Emerging Environmental Genius Award, 2019's Time Magazine's 15 Women Championing Action on Climate Change Award, 2020's Refugees International Richard C. Holbrook Award for her work in promoting the rights and interests of vulnerable communities, and in 2021, she became a laureate of Rolex Awards for Enterprise. So a lot of awards.
Yes, and she's got a lot of responsibility as being chairman, co-chairs, and advocates all around the world, and not just, obviously, in Chad. And she's been doing a lot more. I believe she's got some write-ups happening. She's, of course, going around doing speeches. And she's doing so much in making sure that Indigenous people are at the forefront in this conversation. And even knowing that as a woman, she didn't originally get the respect that someone else, a man, would have, but she still pushed to get this done, because it was a lot about being a peacemaker and bringing her community together, because it was causing so much strife individually and causing so much tension in her community with this lack of resources.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredibly important work. And as always, inspiring to see what she's doing and continues to do. And I'm sure we'll check in and we'll have updates of more awards and more accomplishments and everything. But yeah, as always, if you have any suggestions for people we should talk about on this segment, please let us know. You can email us at stephanieandmomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast or on Instagram at Stuff I Never Told You. Thanks as always to our super producer, Christina.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your favorite shows.